It is one of history's most important questions. Perhaps the biggest mystery of all.
Tonje? Hva skjer her nå? Tonje!
When life is over,
Tonje!
is there something else? September the 25th, 2011. Professional soccer player Karl-Erik Torp collapses in the middle of a game.
Jeg husker at jeg skulle ta et langt løp i angrep på motsatt kant. Så merker jeg vel egentlig bare at jeg mister litt kraft i beina først. At jeg kjenner at det begynner å prikke litt og skjønner egentlig ikke hva som skjer. Og snubler og tryner skikkelig fremover.
Karl-Erik loses consciousness several times and is rushed off the field. A few meters into the tunnel, his heart stops.
Det varte jeg hørte alt fra mellom 3 og 4 minutter, så var jeg på en måte helt borte uten at det ble pumpet noe som helst oksygen eller blod rundt i kroppen.
Karl-Erik is one of many who've experienced cardiac arrest and been very close to death. Some describe extraordinary near-death experiences that can make you wonder. Is there life after death? Tonje lost her mother 3 years ago. Where is she now? Did she just stop existing? Or is there a chance for them to meet again? Tonje and her father have decided to look for answers to these questions.
Det meg. Det var jeg veldig liten, egentlig.
What does science, philosophy, and religion say about this subject? And how has a belief in life after death affected us human beings throughout history?
Who are you?
Death.
What happens after we die? Is there a hell? Is there a God? Do we live again? All right, let me ask one key question. Are there girls?
You're an interesting young man. We'll meet again.
Don't bother.
It's no bother.
The question surrounding the human soul and what happens to it when we die has been debated throughout history. The Egyptians believed the soul resided inside the heart. That's why the heart was placed inside the mummy. In Mesopotamia, they believed that the soul was located in the stomach, more specifically inside the blood-rich liver. Blood means life, so the soul obviously had to reside inside the liver. The French philosopher Descartes concluded centuries later that what separates humans from animals is that we have a soul. In the beginning of the last century, scientists tried to locate the soul and measure its weight. The natural way of doing this was to weigh people before and right after they died. Some claimed that the body weighed slightly less after death, and that this weight difference meant that the soul had left the body. But after further research, most scientists came to the realization that the weight, unfortunately, was the same before and after. When electricity was discovered, some speculated that a good shock or two could bring the dead back. If it was only that easy. death represents a transition to something we do not know. And the rituals around the world provide support and comfort to many. Here in Keelung, Taiwan, they celebrate the Hungry Spirit Festival. They believe that the spirits wander among the living for a whole month. Everywhere, people offer sacrifices to the dead, who have the same requirements as the living. Someone has to be responsible for providing the spirits with what they want.
那整个大致上的水灯制作呢，很简单，就是里面先用竹子打坯，竹子要先打底，好，打底之后呢，我们再糊表纸。你现在看哦，它其实很坚固，因为它糊了3层的纸。
It takes several months to build a house like this. This is one of the sacrifices that is offered up to the good brothers. In other words, the spirits. But to lure the brothers out, these nice houses need to be burnt down.
因为这只是一个传承啊，一个传承文化的含义而已。它烧掉其实物以稀为贵嘛，就是看个人的价值观是什么。
Houses and boats are being built all over Keelung. The houses, boats, and various lanterns are carried in a parade through the city. Death is welcome, and it doesn't need to be dark, sad, or dangerous.
那其实做完这个作品啊，其实每个人都会有成就感。好，那在去年一样有去展示，啊，有去游行，那其实是一种荣幸。对啊，其实也要有这个地方发挥，所以其实整个过程中是还蛮开心的。对。
The houses made for the good brothers are set on fire, and then set out to sea where the spirits dwell. All along the beach, there are sacrifices and prayers for those who are no longer among us. Religious beliefs give us a sense of power over death, and all religions have one thing in common. They promise us a life after death. But if there is a life after death, we have to ask the question, what is death?
Suppose we ask ourselves, what is death? Well, here's a perfectly natural definition. Death might be the end of life. In which case, asking whether or not there's life after death is like asking, is there life after life has come to an end? It's like asking, after all the food on my table has been eaten, is there any food left? And the answer to that is, well, duh, of course not. But I think there's a genuine question that we can ask ourselves if we're a little bit more careful. Suppose I ask instead, might I survive the death of my body? Might it still be the case that I exist after my body comes to an end and is destroyed? Now, there are, in fact, two major positions that have been taken about this question. One position says this: a person isn't just a body. In addition to the body, people also have or are something separate from the body. People have something non-physical, something immaterial. The word we use for this is the soul. This position is known as dualism. Many people find belief in dualism not only plausible, but an attractive possibility. We hope that there's a soul so as to open the door to the possibility of immortality.
Dualism, the belief that we are twofold, we have a body and a soul, is an idea that has been with us since the beginning of mankind. But new research suggests that the idea may be even older.
La Cueva del Castillo es una de las cuevas más importantes del mundo. Tenemos un conjunto de arte rupestre que también es uno de los más importantes del mundo por la cantidad de representaciones que contiene.
For several decades, Roberto has researched the paintings that characterize these walls. Most researchers agree when it comes to who drew the paintings.
La teoría más aceptada es que el arte rupestre, el arte parietal paleolítico, está hecho por nuestra especie, por Homo sapiens. De hecho, la teoría más aceptada entre los investigadores, entre los prehistoriadores que estudian el arte rupestre, era que el arte rupestre de la Cueva del Castillo no iba más allá de aproximadamente 28 o 30.000 años.
If these paintings aren't older than 30,000 years, it suggests that art is exclusive to us, Homo sapiens. However, new methods of dating these paintings has questioned this theory.
Pues en este punto concreto se ha datado un fragmento muy pequeño de esta calcita que recubre este disco rojo, y la datación de esta calcita ha arrojado una fecha de unos 40.000 años antes del presente. Esto significa que la pintura que está debajo de esta calcita que la recubre tiene una antigüedad superior a esos 40.000 años. Y esto pues abre unas perspectivas realmente apasionantes, porque plantea la posibilidad no solamente de que este arte sea mucho más antiguo de lo que se pensaba, sino de que los responsables de estas pinturas no fueran los hombres de nuestra propia especie, sino los hombres de Neandertal.
We believed that a Neanderthal was a primitive caveman with low intelligence. But if it turns out that they created art, it could mean that they had the ability for symbolic thinking and to create religious beliefs, as we do. Archaeological excavations indicate that Neanderthals buried their dead. In 16 out of 20 cases we know of, they were buried in the fetal position.
Y esta posición fetal, hay autores que piensan que tienen una carga simbólica en la cuestión, digamos, el concepto de la muerte como renacimiento, ¿no?
¿Qué pasa?
Maybe it wasn't us Homo sapiens who invented the idea of life after death.
Sino que es posible que nosotros lo aprendiéramos de unos vecinos, de unos congéneres, de unos parientes cercanos que fueron los hombres de Neandertal. Esa es la posibilidad apasionante que abre este tipo de datos, ¿no? De nuevos datos.
Okay, the Neanderthals started to believe there was something on the other side. We had a soul. The Neanderthals disappeared. The Homo sapiens arrived. And then, 800 years before Christ, the Etruscans. They believed it wasn't just life after death. Life after death was divided into two, a good side and a bad side. On the other side of the earth, someone thought that we do not die at all. We will be reborn in a new body again and again, altogether 8.4 million times, until we have gotten rid of the bad karma. Recycling is not a new fad. And then there were some people in the middle of a desert who found out that it was a good idea to create large geometric buildings to help the kings reach the gods. Enter Socrates, the man who fell out with the most important people of Athens. It all ended with a death sentence and the imbibing of poison. But Socrates accepted his fate in good faith. He believed the soul is eternal. The son of the carpenter was then killed on a Friday, only to everyone's despair by bailing next Sunday. Our wrongdoings are forgiven, and from then on we can look forward to Judgment Day. 1,000 years later in Scandinavia, people found out the best thing that could happen was to die as a hero in battle. Then you ended up in Valhalla. Well, it was anything but boring. There was fighting, drinking, and women. Yes, while speaking of women, beautiful women, no one has managed to agree on what the martyrs received as a reward. Is it 72 virgins or 72 angels in heaven? Difficult keeping up? It gets even more complicated. We have just heaven and hell, you say? No, in addition we have purgatory and limbo. No, not that kind of limbo. It's not easy to know what to believe. Many of us say that living is complicated. When we look at it, maybe life after death is even more complicated. The belief that the soul and an afterlife exist has created many religions. It might be hard to believe that our way of relating to death is not the only one. But let's give it a try. Think of something as simple as colour. In the Western world, black is the colour of death. This, however, is not a universal truth. In many Buddhist countries, the colour of death is white. The white colour is connected to purity, to austerity, two things that are central to the funeral here in Sri Lanka. So why are there two such different choices of colour when it comes to death? It's got to do with codes. A bunch of unwritten rules that you usually do not think about. The codes are everywhere. It's almost impossible to avoid them. The codes even follow us into death. Every culture and religion has its own codes when it comes to funerals. To understand how we look at life after death, it is important to understand what lies behind various funeral customs.
How do different religious groups think about, use, or understand handling of the dead, either through burial or cremation? Burial is predominantly used amongst Muslim, Jewish, and Christian groups. Buddhists, Sikhs, Hindus use cremation, predominantly, but not all the time.
Funeral rituals change in pace with new technology and through interaction with other cultures.
Modern societies that have populations from all religious groups have to figure out how they adopt and adapt to these practices, and they have, because no matter where groups go, their members died. It's these old devices from the late 19th, early 20th century that establish a kind of industrial design that then begins to cut through and cut across very ancient religious practices, but these ancient religious practices then adapt and they figure out how we can still maintain our practice but actually use the new machinery.
In many Western countries, Hindus, Sikhs and Buddhists utilize modern cremation equipment. At the same time, technology has also adapted. As an example, some crematoriums make it possible for the family to see the coffin being engulfed in flames, as if it is burning on an open fire. In Christianity, cremation is a relatively new concept. This has not happened without resistance. But religions have always borrowed and taken customs and rituals from each other.
Greece was the cradle of Western civilization. It exerted a powerful cultural influence on its neighbors. Corinth was a great, powerful city, the center of a province. It was taken by storm by Rome in 146 BC.
The conquest of Greece was pretty unusual. Even though Greece lost political control, the Romans let the cultural and spiritual life carry on as usual. The Romans were quite tolerant towards other religions. They even borrowed gods from abroad.
For example, this temple is dedicated to Apollo, one of the great Greek gods, and Apollo later became a major Roman deity. The Romans also followed Greek practice when it came to the disposal of the dead. Both favoured cremation, but things were to change when a new religion entered the Roman world. Christianity came to Rome, and with it the conviction that there is only one God. Christianity is a monotheistic religion. To worship other gods is pagan, sacrilegious, and utterly wrong.
The Christians' intolerance towards other gods was disturbing to the Romans, and this led to anger and eventually the persecution of Christians. So those who followed Jesus had to look for a way of practicing their faith in both life and death.
One answer was the creation of places like this, catacombs. Early Christians excavated subterranean galleries and halls in which they could worship in privacy, even in some secrecy, but mostly they were cemeteries, places in which they could inter their dead according to their beliefs and rituals. This catacomb in Milos is older than the catacombs in Rome, and it is an astonishing place. Very powerful, very architectural, with these semicircular recesses stretching almost to infinity. So in these recesses, whole families of Christians would be buried, awaiting the end of days. It makes it clear, to me at least, that it was very important to these early Christians that their bodies were preserved intact until the resurrection, and the bodies would be rise up, assembled for the last judgment.
The belief in the resurrection of the body made cremation a contentious subject. Because if one were to rise from the dead, one needed a body, and if this body was burned, there was a problem. Until the Middle Ages in Europe, it was important that the body was preserved in some way. At least you had to preserve the major bones of the body. Here in Sedlec, in the Czech Republic, these bones were used to create one of the world's most beautiful bone chapels. For Catholics, cremation was prohibited for a long time. The Pope eventually lifted the ban in 1963. Cremation was also used to show opposition to organized religion. In Russia, cremation was highly recommended. The communists used it deliberately as a tool against the Christian Orthodox Church. Cremation is now more commonplace in the West, where it mostly takes place in an enclosed room out of public view. But this is not the only way it is done. Every year, between 5,000 and 6,000 people are cremated on cremation platforms along the Bagmati River in Nepal. But this ritual is not carried out privately. This is a much more public cremation than we are used to here in the West. Death is brought outside to the streets. These rituals tell us a lot about how Hindus look at the afterlife. The oldest son circles his mother 3 times. This symbolizes the Holy Trinity in Hinduism. Brahma created the universe, Vishnu, who preserves the universe, and Shiva destroys the universe. Then he lights the fire in his mother's mouth. This was where the last breath of her life left her. And this is where the breath of life will start in the next reincarnation. Basically, one is not considered dead until one is cremated. Hindus believe that the soul is trapped in the physical body, and that rebirth, samsara, is a form of punishment. The ultimate goal is to avoid having to come back to this earth. Cremation is a way to help the soul be freed from the body. It is cleansing, and therefore it is so important to Hindus. The Bagmati River flows next to the temple, and this is part of Shiva. The belief is that the Bagmati River will carry the ashes on its way down to India. That's where the river becomes part of the Ganges, which is run through the holy place of Varanasi. The immortal city, the place where the cosmos originated, according to the Hindus. If one dies here, there is a good chance to reach the ultimate goal and not be born again. In other cultures, it is important to bring the dead back from the grave. For the Merina people in Madagascar, the living and the dead are not something that are opposed to each other. The Merina people live in two worlds, the society they live in and the society of their ancestors. What we are used to is that when someone dies, we say our goodbyes. One is buried and we find peace for eternity. But here in Madagascar, one is buried several times. Every 7th year, they take the remains out of the graves so that they can party with the living. The ritual of Famadiana may seem very distant to us here in the West, but is it? Just look at the United States. This is a jazz funeral in New Orleans. It is a Christian ceremony, and it may seem as though it has nothing in common with the ritual in Madagascar. But if we look at it more closely, we can find similarities to the ceremonies in Madagascar and other African countries. The slaves who were brought to America took with them their culture and their traditions, leaving a permanent mark on American society. So, there might be an obvious link between the jazz movement and Famadiana. To the Merina people, their ancestors are still alive. Every time their ancestors are brought out of the graves, they are wrapped in a new white silk garment. The bond between the living and the ancestors is renewed before the dead are taken back to their crypts. To retrieve our beloved from the cemetery and then to dance with them is a very unpleasant thought for most of us. Rituals can be a challenge. In the Himalayas, they have ways of dealing with the dead that have raised skepticism in the West. It's mostly just rocks here. Burial in stone would cause the body to be left behind. And that wouldn't be good for the soul. This is one of the world's highest areas. And here in the Himalayas, 13,000 feet above sea level, there are no trees that are needed to carry out a cremation. The Buddhists who live here in the Tibetan area of Nepal have found a solution. A private burial method, a sky burial. In a sky burial, the dead are placed in a sacred place in the mountains, for the vultures to devour the body. Like the Hindus, the Buddhists believe in reincarnation, that we are born again. The goal is to get closer to Buddha and preferably be reborn as a human. However, it is possible to be degraded and come back as an animal. Perhaps you were once a vulture. That's why it's important for Buddhists to care for all living things. And by feeding the birds with your body, you do one last good deed. Another creature will live on. This belief is essential to the Tibetan culture, and the tradition of the sky burial goes far back in history.
Teni din da roge sha tang ye ge da ji shemba jongare tokten zene tokten ba go da dur sha go ne teka ta teni cha go la ter Then the top that is Shulata Shago Satsar, Chagi Satsar, the Ruago Chikuche, the Ruago Kango Druche, the Ruago Dilitapne. Ruago Tapnit in it, any child terrier.
The vultures are becoming extinct, and the ritual has almost disappeared here. It has been several years since the last sky burial. For those who lose the tradition, the loss is difficult to handle, because they lose something that is important, something that was sacred.
Chago lanita ke rogo ni rableche shago ter te chago mayong e gangola orango sempa go ta chi toto ya raji ta chago mayong na sempa tyugin raji dindeji yongdu aran sempa tyu raji.
Sky burial in the Himalayas is among the last funeral rites in the world where the body is left to animals. But the practice was common across the globe and is still carried out in a few places. For the Maasai in Africa, it was customary to leave the dead to lions and hyenas. In ancient Persia, the body was placed on the Tower of Silence for the vultures to eat them. And the Comanche in the southern United States used to place the dead on a platform where predators could take care of the body. The funeral is not the only ceremony of death we have. Several places in the world have an annual festival to honor and commemorate the dead. In Mexico, they celebrate Dia de Muertos, the Day of the Dead.
Para nosotros la muerte es algo natural. No es un tanto así que tememos a la muerte, pues, porque cuando se nace con alegría. Cuando se casan, se hace es fiesta, es alegría. Y cuando se muere igual, porque para nosotros el morir no se acaba ahí, no se pierde el lazo familiar. Solo al contrario, sentimos que nos une más.
This family is preparing for the celebrations of the Day of the Dead. They have recently lost someone who will be the focus of the celebrations this year.
Esta ceremonia para nosotros es una comunión familiar, donde todo el mundo participa, los hijos, los primos, nietos, tíos. Las señoras en la cocina preparando el desayuno, el almuerzo, los hombres preparando el altar. Una vez que se terminó eso, también se prepararon los arcos florales.
This is an ancient tradition. The dead will be honored in this way for 3 years after their demise.
Son 3 años consecutivos que se le lleva el arco, pues. Sí, son 3 años, porque nosotros creemos, lo que comentaba inicialmente, dentro de la cosmovisión indígena son 3 planos, ¿no? En este caso el cielo, la tierra y el inframundo. En nuestra cultura o en los purépechas nunca mueren las personas. Mueren cuando ya se les olvida, pues. Y nosotros como familiares nunca los vamos a olvidar.
People gather at the cemeteries with offerings to their loved ones on the other side. The flower stands have plenty of fruit and candy shaped like skulls. The idea is that the offerings will make the dead happy. If your grandfather had a favorite tipple, enjoying a special kind of corona, then that's what he got poured tonight. If your aunt used to sing a particular song at the top of her lungs, that's the song she will hear again now. And the party lasts until dawn. Just like in Mexico, the dead are invited to the celebration of the Hungry Spirits Festival in Taiwan. The offerings are a way to communicate with those on the other side. A way to show that one has not forgotten those who have passed away. The ritual is important on many levels. It provides identity and a sense of affiliation. And it helps us live with death.
Mi abuelito y mi abuelita. Se murieron 2 abuelitos. Tres abuelitos.
Festivities and rituals may make it possible for us to take death less seriously. Death, which may seem incomprehensible and infinite, turns into something more concrete. We can even joke about it. It's less dangerous. And maybe this is something we all need, regardless of what culture or country we belong to.
I wish to complain about this parrot what I purchased not half an hour ago from this very boutique.
Oh, yes, the Norwegian blue. What's wrong with it?
I'll tell you what's wrong with it. It's dead, that's what's wrong with it.
It's not, it's pining.
It's not pining, it's passed on. This parrot is no more. It has ceased to be. It's expired and gone to meet its maker. This is a late parrot. It's a stiff. Bereft of life, it rests in peace. If you hadn't nailed it to the perch, it would be pushing up the daisies. It's run down the curtain and joined the choir invisible. This is an parrot!
We've been focusing on dualism for quite a while now. The belief that we are divided in two, the body and the soul. Not everyone agrees with this. Some believe the existence of the soul creates more problems than solutions.
In contrast to the dualist view, there's a view that says all that a person is a body. There is no soul, there's just the body. You know, a lump of flesh and blood. This second position is known as physicalism because it says all there are physical objects. There's nothing immaterial. Obviously, then, what we need to do is to ask ourselves which of these two views is the correct one.
So, should we agree with the dualists that the soul exists, or should we join the gang who say no, the soul does not exist, all we have is our body? If one believes that the soul exists, then some difficult questions arise.
So, for example, we might wonder, if there are souls, well, where are they? I mean, we all know where the body is. You know, my body's located right here. You know where your body is.
The good old question, is the soul inside the body? And if so, where? Imagine that you cut off your arm. Do you lose some of your soul, or is it still in one piece? And if it is, then the soul is not in the arm. Is the soul in the head? And if so, where?
It's not at all obvious what the answer to that question is.
If the soul does exist, the possibility to survive death opens up, but there is no guarantee. The dualists believe that your soul can give orders to your body, but the body can also give orders back to the soul. Take a needle and stick it deep into your arm. Injury is something that happens to your body, but you feel the pain in your soul.
Souls can affect bodies, and bodies can affect souls. But if that's right, then we have to worry about the following possibility. It could be that when the body dies, the soul dies too.
Okay, all right. So what about the near-death experiences? Aren't those proof that we have a soul that leaves our body when we die?
Jeg husker jo ikke at jeg sovna, eller at jeg forsvant, og det var bare sånn, plutselig så var det mørkt, og da var det bare ingenting. Og det liksom lett å forholde seg til I forhold til at når det skjedde, så var det så udramatisk, at plutselig så var det mørkt.
Not everyone has wonderful visions of near-death experiences. But for those who see something, what could the explanation be?
Det vi vet också för många års forskning, det är att olika områden eller regioner I hjärnan är ansvariga för olika funktioner som hörsel, syn, hukommelse. Och bak här är synsdelen av hjärnan. Det är fler nervceller I det centrala mitt I synsfältet än I ytterkanterna. Så om det blir reduktion I oxygen så vill det vara nervcellerna I de perifera områdena som mister ämnen först. Den centrala delen av synsfältet är det som blir kvar till sist. Och det blir akkurat som en tunnel.
It's not just people close to death who see a bright light at the end of the tunnel. It turns out that fighter pilots sometimes see the same.
Det sker också en reduktion av blodtillförseln till synsområdena vid den typ av acceleration som jagerpiloterna blir utsatt för.
The vision of a tunnel is not the only description. Out-of-body experiences. To see your life flash before your eyes. But does there need to be a supernatural explanation for these experiences? Not necessarily. It could also happen because the brain is under tremendous stress.
I när döden tillstånd så sätts den normala funktionsnivån hos nervcellerna sätts lite utav spill. I en slig gråzoner så kan den typen väldigt speciella sansningar uppstå.
Hos meg så var det bare helt brått och uventet och jag förstod inte vad som skedde och så blev det bara sort.
Media rapporterar ju oftare personer som har haft en motsatt upplevelse än den upplevelsen du har haft, vilket gör att man kan ju då tro att det är den vanligaste upplevelsen.
Statistics show the opposite. Cardiac patients who see something in near-death experiences are in the minority. Most people see nothing.
Jag har inte något problem med att tänka att de miljarderna år før jeg tenkte og ble født, så var det helt mørkt. Det er ikke noe sånn at det var en tung periode for meg før jeg ble født. Det er så enkelt for meg altså, at det som skjer etter døden er på en måte det som skjedde før jeg ble født. Og jeg husker ikke tilbake til den tiden.
Medicine and neuroscience are trying to provide a biological explanation for near-death experiences, but they still have a long way to go. But if near-death experiences occur in our brain, can faith also occur there? One researcher claims he has invented a unique device. He believes that this device can help us locate parts of our brain that give us religious experiences. The device is actually a helmet. The God helmet. Dr. Michael Persinger has more than 30 years of research on how our brains can create religious experiences. Have we created God in our brains?
This is the famous helmet, also known as the God helmet. You can see that what it does is it generates magnetic fields through these solenoids, which are driven by a computer. So we apply these pulse magnetic fields across the brain. You see on both sides. The person's brain is in here, and we can measure their second-to-second brain activity. And if you stimulate the right side in particular, the person experienced a sense presence. Depending upon their culture, they may attribute it to a god, a haunt, a member of their family, or even an ancestor in the case of some of the Aboriginals. And the actual equipment that runs the helmet is, of course, right here. Hey, Maestro?
Yeah.
Can you set up your computer to show them what it looks like?
Sure.
All right.
By stimulating a specific area on the right side of the brain, the temporal lobe, Persinger believes that he is able to provoke a spiritual experience.
Well, the primary implications of our research is that the sensed presence, the feeling of another entity, of a sentient being, that it's a brain phenomenon that is generated by brain activity, and that certain conditions make it so powerful, so real, that it may actually change your life forever.
Hvordan gikk det egentlig?
Ingenting. Nada.
Jeg som hadde så mange spørsmål.
The feeling that there must be something more, something that is not physical, the belief in the spiritual and life after death are the basis of all religions. It's all about belief. So what's the point of biological explanations?
Really, this research suggests that there's another explanation. And here's why it's important. If people will kill other people because they believe their God experience is so real that other people are a threat, and that other people who believe other things must be exterminated, if indeed it's not because there are gods, but because it's our own brain creating them, we better find out why and how it's done. And does that mean that God does not exist? That doesn't mean religion is not valid. No, what it says is that the brain is the source of all experience.
No one has a definitive answer on questions of faith, the soul, and a life after death. Science has increasingly challenged religions on these subjects. But the belief that there must be something more on the other side is so deeply instilled in us that it will probably continue to live on around the world. There are two things we can be absolutely sure of. One is that we will all die. And the second is that before we die, we shall live first.
Jeg var mer redd for døden før dette skjedde enn etter. Jeg tenker lite på det og prøver å egentlig ta dagene som det kommer og være glad for det.
Karl-Erik had to give up his career as a professional soccer player, but the near-death experience has given him a new perspective on life. And he still enjoys soccer by being a coach, and sometimes he even plays for Brand's junior team.
Min mening har vært å hele tiden utvikle meg og bli bedre som fotballspiller. Klart det fokuset har endret seg helt. Nå er fokus å finne andre ting som driver meg fremover. Jeg er en livsnytter, jeg liker å kose meg og liker å oppleve nye ting. Jeg elsker å reise, jeg elsker å bruke kroppen, være ute i naturen. Mitt fokus er helt klart hvilke muligheter ligger foran meg, ikke bak meg.
Life goes on, and when one day it ends, then we are allowed to hope that it resembles a computer game, that we get another chance after game over.